Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh or anywhere you get your podcast from. Well, as of the second intermission yesterday, I was hoping to come on here and talk about an undefeated week for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but instead, 20 minutes that completely changed the outcome of really how I'm feeling about this team going into today. And instead, we're talking about them being winless against the Metropolitan Division in the midst of a Metropolitan Division road trip. So what are we going to do today? Obviously, it's a Wednesday live stream. So we know we're definitely going to do our weekend review. We're going to give our 3 stars of the week. We're going to answer all of your listener questions, but we're also going to talk about their struggles against the Metropolitan Division. We're going to talk about their inability to close out games this season and why that's becoming a bigger issue. And overall, we're just going to have a nice discussion about where the Pittsburgh Penguins are at this point in the season. Let's start with the week in review, though, because as I mentioned, I was getting ready to come into here today and sing the praises of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And to a point, we still should a little bit. They bounced back from their 6-game losing streak, right? If you look at the past week, they're 2-0-1, 5 of a possible 6 standings points. It's much better than what it was the previous 2 weeks. So in that kind of capacity, it's a bonus. It's a positive. It's a good thing. But when you look at what happened last night, it kind of just puts a dampened mood into the spirits of the entire fan base. Let's start with the 2 wins. Obviously, a 2-1 victory over the Anaheim Ducks. I think that's the game the Penguins played their best all season long. Now, did they run up the scoreboard like they have done in certain games? No, they weren't able to. Why? Because they were absolutely goalied by Lucas Dostal. But you know what? He came into that game with a 940 plus save percentage. He's been doing that to a lot of teams. So you sit back and you say, all right, they'll get their chances. As long as they finish this one out, then you can say that they've been playing their best game of the entire season. They were defensively responsible for the most part. They were keeping Alex Nedeljkovic a little bit unscathed through that game, playing much better defensively. And then eventually, Sidney Crosby finally breaks through, not just for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but for himself as well. Not only does he get 1 goal, he gets multiple goals, including the overtime winner, and he hasn't looked back since that moment. He carried that momentum into Saturday's game against Canadiens, scores 2 more goals. Alex Nedeljkovic does what he did on Thursday, once again on Saturday, which is step up big late in the game and continue to stand tall and be the kind of the driving force to getting over the hump and getting those victories on Thursday and Saturday. It was a lot of good defense through the first 2.5 periods, good goaltending in the last 10 minutes of the third period. And that was the recipe for success against the Ducks. It was the recipe for success against the Canadiens. It was not quite the recipe for success yesterday against the New York Islanders. It looked like the same recipe through 2 periods. The Penguins have been playing very well, kind of responsible on the defensive end of the ice, forcing the issue on the offensive zone, seeing a little bit more out of those bottom 9 forward lines, right? We have the top line that's been good this entire week, but the bottom 9 is something we continue to question. Can they figure it out? Mike Sullivan had continued to put different combination after different combination out there, searching, pleading, trying to find any signs of life in the bottom 9. You started to see it a little bit yesterday. And no, they didn't score right away. No, they didn't score, a bunch of goals again, but they had been playing the way that they played against Anaheim. They'd been playing the way they played against Montreal. And you had to feel good if you were a Pittsburgh Penguins fan watching through that first 2 periods. They get a 2-1 lead on the back of, Sidney Crosby and then Evgeni Malkin on the power play once again. And he thought, okay, if they can do what they've done the last 2 games and continue to perform that way, then they should be able to walk out of here with their first 3-game win streak of the season and walk into a very difficult doubleheader, which we'll get to in a little bit, with a nice bit of momentum riding behind the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then we see what happens in the third period. They go into what I called yesterday on Twitter the Sully Shell. And the Sully Shell is simple. You play the entire third period with a lead in your own zone, so much so that whenever you inevitably give up that tying goal, you have no momentum left to push back and get back out in front. That's what's happened on multiple occasions this season, and that is 100% what happened to the Pittsburgh Penguins yesterday. They fall behind. If you look at the score sheet, the shots on goal were close to even. The scoring chances were close to even. The shot attempts were close to even. But a lot of that was the Penguins taking it in, taking one shot, and retreating. That happened far too often in that third period yesterday, and that's happened far too often most times the Penguins have had a third period lead this season. So they do that. They end up giving up one power play goal. They end up giving up the tying goal just a few minutes later. And all of a sudden, the Pittsburgh Penguins are tied with the New York Islanders. And I think at that point, the only time where it felt like the Pittsburgh Penguins could have bounced back and got the 2 points in this one was whenever they got a power play in overtime. Because that's the one thing that the Penguins have surprisingly been much better at this season. They're 2-0 in the overtime period. If things get to a shootout, we know how that goes, and we saw how that went yesterday. But in overtime, they've been pretty good. On the power play, they've been better this season. So you put those two things together, you were hoping the Penguins could close things out last night when they got that man advantage in the extra frame. They weren't able to, and then we saw what happened in the shootout. The Penguins just are not good in the shootout. They end up losing that one 4-3 in a shootout. A tough loss for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And there's a tweet here from Jay Fresh Hockey who said, quote, "The Penguins blew another 2-goal lead last night. They've already blown 5 this season in just 14 games after squandering 12 all of last season and 11 in the 2022-23 season. So already at a higher clip, the Penguins are blowing third period leads, and it's costing them points in the standings. And I understand it's November 6th. You can't win the Stanley Cup by November 6th, but I think I've said this probably too many times on these shows. You can certainly lose an opportunity at the playoffs in October and November. And I think that's what you're seeing with the Pittsburgh Penguins, with all of these blown third period leads, all of these blown opportunities to get extra standings points behind your resume early in that season. So it's the Sully shell. It's a blown lead. It's a poor performance at the end of the day whenever you look at it in its entirety, because it kind of squanders what you saw in the first two periods. It squanders better defensive play, and it squanders a great opportunity against a team that is going to be neck and neck with you for that wild card race if you end up being in it by the end of the season. The Islanders are always in and around the same spot as the Pittsburgh Penguins. At least for the last 4 or 5 years, that's exactly where they've been. You need to get the extra points. You need to not concede points when you take a 3-1 lead midway through the third period. Not only because it's the Islanders, but because this is an Islanders team that was primed to drop a game against the Penguins, missing 3 of their top 6 defensemen, missing their top star in Matt Barzal. You had the opportunity to go in there, get a win on Long Island, and get your first win against the Metropolitan Division team while continuing to climb your way back up into the standings and continuing to build a much better feeling around the organization than there has been all season long. Instead, they go into that Sully shell, they give up the lead, and they end up taking the loss and only getting 1 of a possible 2 standings points in a game where they had it in hand. They had it in hand, and they just weren't able to put it away, which brings me to a larger issue here. The Penguins have gotten off to a slow start against the Metropolitan Division. 0-2-1 this year against the Metro. I said, missed opportunity last night against the Islanders, and you can say whatever you want about the first 2 losses, right? Opening night, you're outmatched against the New York Rangers. It just is the way that it went from puck drop in that one, and you lose 6-0. A couple of games later, you end up losing to the Carolina Hurricanes. Sure, it happens. The Canes came in, and they played their game plan to a T against you, and whenever you let them get to that, they're going to beat you. But now you're 0-2-1 against the Metro, a division that historically has been up and down for the Pittsburgh Penguins, right? A lot of the times they struggle against those top teams, the the Rangers, the Hurricanes, the Devils, when they're at their best, always get the Penguins number. You have to be better against your own division, especially in the NHL today when that playoff format is built for you to have to go through your division to do anything. And I understand we're getting way out ahead here. But if you have any hope to do anything in the NHL now, you have to be successful against your own division. And the Penguins 0-2-1, and now they're going to go up against 2 more division opponents that are playing very good hockey. You go on Friday night to Carolina, a team that's already beaten you 4-1. And then on Saturday night, you go to Washington, to a team that is one of the biggest surprises across the NHL, but one of the teams that has been the best across the NHL to start this season. If you don't get your act together and you end up going, let's say 0-4-1 or even 0-2-3 against the Metro in your first 5 games against your own division, that's once again another just example of how they're putting themselves behind the 8 ball, and they're putting themselves in a hole that they're going to have to dig themselves out of very quickly if they want any chance to kind of be a realistic option for a playoff spot this season. I mean, that kind of leads into that next segment, which is what's up next. You have Carolina, you have Washington. Then, of course, on Monday night, they return home from this road trip to take on another very good team in the Dallas Stars. But it's just unfortunate that you had an opportunity to kind of continue to build that momentum, continue to move towards what your goals are, which is playing better hockey on a more consistent basis. And they just fell victim to something that they've done far too often this season and in seasons past, which is blowing third period leads. And that nugget there from Jay Fresh Hockey, 5 blown third period leads in the first 14 games. It's crazy whenever you're blowing leads in over a third of the games that you've played. It's absolutely insane. So we'll have to see what they're able to do. When asked about it post-game, Mike Sullivan said, we just need to play better. I think that is at a base level what they need to do. So we'll have to wait and see what they're able to do against Carolina, against Washington, and against Dallas. That is a murderer's row of a schedule over the next week. But hey, listen, they were able to take care of business this past week, 2-0-1. You take it, you look at it, and you say 5 out of 6 standings points. You can't be overly upset about it, but you really left one on the table there last night on the island. Let's get into the 3 stars of the week, and following that, we'll get to all of your questions. So make sure if you're tuned in live with us at Tip of the Ice-Burgh that you drop your question in the comment section below. But let me give you my 3 stars of the week before we get to that. 3rd star of the week is going to be the one, the only Rickard Rakell. He's having a really good season. He continues to put together solid performance after solid performance. This past week, he's played in 3 games. He's notched 3 assists, and he has been a perfect piece to go right there alongside Evgeni Malkin and Sidney Crosby on that top line. A lot of the questions for me when it comes to that configuration is, well, can you get anything going in the bottom 9? As far as the top line is concerned, I have no issues whatsoever with the way they've played. Yeah, defensively, there's been a couple of lapses, but I think that is going to hold true for the entire team, not just the top line. So Rickard Rakell has been really good. Crosby has taken over this past week. Rakell's been the one feeding him. So you have to give credit where credit is due. Rickard Rakell is the 3rd star of the week this week for the Pittsburgh Penguins. 2nd star of the week, I think we've had a goaltender, if I'm not mistaken, in every single one of the 3 stars of the week, probably because he's typically left out to dry by the defense the Penguins have had, but they had good defense this week, and the numbers reflect it for Alex Nedeljkovic between the pipes. 3 games played for Ned. He goes 2-0-1 in those 3 games, a .933 save percentage and a 1.66 goals against average. He was always good early this season, and that was the thing with Ned, is his numbers going into this past week were not good. They were awful, actually. And a lot of the reason was he kind of fell apart late, and some of that was due to the fact that he just couldn't stay on his game throughout the full 60. Most of that was probably that the defense didn't help out very much, and Ned had to stand on his head through the entire game and just ran out of gas. Well, this past week, he showed what he can do whenever you play better defense in front of him. It doesn't have to be the best defensive performances you've ever seen, but just minimum bar, better defense than they've played all season. And what does he do? He goes out there and gets a .933 save percentage, allows 1 goal in back-to-back games. And last night, I mean, the first goal was pure luck for Kyle Palmieri, just floats down and he's able to get his stick on puck, and Ned had no idea where it was. But at the same time, those other 2 goals, I don't really put on him. You're hoping that he would have been able to close the door like he did against Anaheim, like he did against Montreal, because he was pressured a lot in the last 6-7 minutes of both of those games, and he was just spectacular. He wasn't able to do it last night, but I don't begrudge him for that in the least. Alex Nedeljkovic, 2nd star of the week. And the 1st star of the week, I mean, there's no discussion, right? There is absolutely no discussion whatsoever. The 1st star of the week is the captain, Sidney Crosby. He was named the NHL's 3rd star of the week. So if they did that, far be it for me to not give him the 1st star of the week for just the Pittsburgh Penguins. 3 games played over this past week, 5 goals. We had been asking on these live streams, specifically myself, as well as all of the listeners that have been putting comments into the comment section, have all been asking, Why is Sid only at 1 goal? How is Sid only at 1 goal? Well, he answered all those questions and more in this past week. 5 goals in the past 3 games, including 2 game winners, an overtime game winner against the Ducks, and then another game winner to tack on against the Montreal Canadiens. He continues to be absolutely dominant, as he has been the last 4 games, including last Tuesday's game against the Minnesota Wild. The dude is just on another level right now, and he's 2 goals away from another milestone, which seemingly I forget about these milestones because there are so many of them, but he's 2 goals away from 600 on his career. So those are your 3 stars of the week. Rickard Rakell at number 3, Alex Nedeljkovic at number 2, and Sidney Crosby as the number 1 star of the week. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, getting to all of your questions. So make sure you drop them in the comment section below. We'll get to them before we head out today. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. We're jumping into all of your questions right now. So if you're tuned in live at Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube, make sure you drop your question in the comment section below. We'll try to get to as many as we can before leaving for today. Let's start it off with Peter, who wants to know, is Matt Nieto really better than who he would take out of the Penguins lineup? It's a good question. It's a very good question. And I don't think the answer is something that you're going to like. He's not, but that doesn't mean he's not going to get an opportunity, right? I mean, right now, Kevin Hayes missed practice today. They called it a maintenance day, even though he's being evaluated for an upper body injury. Maybe the Penguins sit him for a game or two. But again, Nieto has to be ready to come in and take that opportunity. I don't think he is much better than who he would take out of the lineup unless you're taking out a guy like Anthony Beauvillier. And again, both of them, it's hard to compare, right? But they're different players. Matt Nieto is a defense first, has some skating ability, but for the most part is out there to kill penalties and be a depth piece that plays well in your own zone. Whereas Anthony Beauvillier is supposed to be responsible in the defensive zone, but you're hoping he brings a little bit more by way of scoring and offensive opportunities. I think that's the one player that would be taken out of the lineup. As far as how much better is Matt Nieto, I think it's marginal. But I think that's where you're at if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins. You're still trying to see what actually works for the bottom 9, especially if you're going to keep Malkin up with Sidney Crosby. Mike Sullivan has been continuing to shuffle deck chairs, but unfortunately, nothing has seemed to work consistently. Now, last night, I liked what I saw out of Drew O'Connor, Lars Eller, and Cody Glass as the second line. I think that's something that should get some run here. But as an overall, the bottom 9 is something that continues to have a lot of question marks and not a lot of answers, maybe Matt Nieto gets an opportunity to get in just simply because the Penguins will still be searching for some of those answers. Let's go over to Austin, who says, is there a line or pairing combo you'd want to see that the Penguins haven't tried yet? Mine is Valtteri Puustinen alongside Sidney Crosby. I wouldn't mind seeing that either. The one thing about Puustinen is in a lot of these games, and we talked about it yesterday on a full episode of the Tip of the Iceberg, where we tried to construct the bottom nine how we would want to if we had the players currently at Mike Sullivan's disposal. Valtteri Puustinen has kind of faded into the back a little bit too much in the games that he's played. And in some instances, he's looked very good, but in others, he's just kind of disappeared. And he's not a player that you want to disappear. You want him to always be evident on the ice. You want him to always be somebody that is making a play or making a moment. He just doesn't do that on a consistent enough basis. If he was with Crosby, he probably would, simply because Crosby typically makes those things happen regardless of who's on his line. So I wouldn't hate seeing that, not to mention the fact that, Valtteri Puustinen's greatest asset is his shot. And I don't think he's had nearly enough opportunities to unleash it. But right now, what are we seeing from Sidney Crosby? We're seeing Sidney Crosby take over as that goal scorer. We're seeing Sidney Crosby shoot the puck more, call his own number a little bit more. Right now, at this very moment, if you put Puustinen with Crosby, it's probably not going to do very much for Valtteri Puustinen, because Crosby is in that mode where he says, I'm just going to finish everything myself right now. He did it last year, which is why he was a 40-plus goal scorer at the age of 36. He's starting to ramp that up now, which is why he scored 5 goals in the past 3 games. So maybe not the best time, but I think at some point it wouldn't be bad to see Valtteri Puustinen with Sid. The one that I'm looking at is Cody Glass with Sidney Crosby. The two paired up and matched up on that overtime winner against Anaheim. Cody Glass clearly has that pedigree, which is why he was drafted as a top 10 pick by the Vegas Golden Knights, is because he was somebody that had that high offensive upside. Now, he hasn't reached it at the NHL level, and he hasn't reached it with the Penguins. He's the only forward outside of Rutger McGroarty, who's only played in 3 games, to not score a goal this season. Some of that is opportunity. Some of that is not being able to finish chances, but I would like to see Cody Glass get an opportunity with Crosby, similar to what you're saying, Austin, with Puustinen. And you just want to see a young guy get that chance. But as of right now, I'm not doing it, because the first line has been the best and most consistent piece of this team over the past week, and it's led to them being 2-0-1. So as of right now, I'm keeping Malkin and Raquel with Crosby. I think eventually that's going to fade out whenever the bottom 9 continues to not produce. And I think they eventually move Malkin back down. And when they do, I'm looking at guys like Puustinen. I'm looking at guys like Cody Glass to maybe get an opportunity similar to what we saw early in the season when Anthony Beauvillier was up there, so they can try to spread out some of the talent throughout the lineup. Let's go over to Dabton, who says, at what point does Sullivan or Dubas say, screw it, and call up McGroarty, Poulin, Koivunen, Ponomarev, Pickering, and on the backside, or whoever, and completely shake up the bottom lines? Unfortunately, you just can't do that because you have to put all these other players that you're replacing them with somewhere else, right? You have to probably have to trade a lot of them. And right now, I'm not sure how much trade value there is on the Penguins forwards. I mean, maybe a Lars Eller, but are you really willing to get rid of a player that has been one of your most consistent all season long? Even when you were losing 6 games in a row, Lars Eller was a guy that was playing at a fairly good level. Are you willing to do that? And if you are, sure, you say screw it. At what point is the question? I think that point is much later in the season. I think that point is whenever they're at January 15th or February 1st, and they are far out of a playoff spot, and they say, you know what? Let's sell off whoever we can sell off. Let's clean the whiteboard as much as we can, and let's start putting these names like McGroarty, like Koivunen, like Ponomarev. Let's start giving them more and more opportunity and more ice time at the NHL level. But I think that's still very far off. Let's go to Tanger, who says, when do you think they'll start Blomqvist again? Also, what team do you think has the best shot against, do the Penguins have the best shot against between the Capitals, Stars, and the Canes? I think Blomqvist gets a start one of the 2 games this weekend. I have to look back and see who started. I believe it was Blomqvist against the Canes the first time, which makes me think that they're probably going to roll Alex Nedeljkovic against the Canes and Blomqvist against the Caps. But again, Nedeljkovic has also always played fairly well against the Caps the past year and a half since he's been with Pittsburgh. So it's hard, but he's going to play this weekend, right? You're not going to start Nedeljkovic on another back-to-back on Friday and Saturday. So I would imagine Joel Blomqvist gets a start one of those two games. And then after that is when it gets really interesting, because Saturday is when Tristan Jarry's conditioning stint comes to an end. By early next week, he will be back up with the NHL squad, and then decisions have to be made. So Blomqvist, I would imagine, gets one of those two starts this weekend. And after that, I don't know when he's going to get another opportunity. We'll have to wait and see the direction the Penguins take. And who do they have a best chance against in the next 3 games? I would say the Washington Capitals. I know that's one of the teams. I think are the best of those 3 teams as of right now, as far as when you look at their record. But the Penguins and Caps always play it tight. No matter which team is soaring in the standings and which team is struggling, those teams always play tightly contested contests. So I would give the Penguins the best shot at Cap One Arena against the Washington Capitals. Let's jump on over to Kyle's question, which is a very interesting scenario and a very interesting question here. So I appreciate it, Kyle. If you could swap defenses with any team in the league to fit the Penguins' current system, what team would you choose? Some people might not like this answer because a lot of people don't like one of the players on this blue line. But if I'm taking an entire blue line and swapping it out with the Pittsburgh Penguins of what they have right now, I'm taking the New York Rangers. Like, I am taking the New York Rangers, not only because they have the lowest goals allowed per game played in the NHL right now, which is a big factor because that obviously means that the players that are out there are playing very well, but because they bring you a little bit of everything, right? You have the offensive upside of a guy like Adam Fox. You have the kind of young star budding in Braden Schneider. You have that physical presence in Jacob Trouba. There's the name I know everybody hates. But you have a little amalgamation of everything. You have a little bit of grit with Lindgren. You have a little bit of everything if you have the New York Rangers blue line. I like the way it's constructed. I like that they have that physicality plus that skill matched very well. That's something that the Penguins did for a very long time in Pittsburgh. I mean, you look back to those early Sidney Crosby era days where they had Gonchar and Letang to fit the skill profile. They had Scuderi to be that defensive defenseman profile. They had Brooks Orpik to be that physical profile. That's what you're looking for. That's the best defenses you can get in the NHL that has a little bit of everything, and they can adapt to whichever way the game is going. Is the game getting overly physical? Okay, good. Jacob Trouba can go out there and do something, whether it be illegal or not. He can usually step on that borderline. A lot of the times he goes over, but there's a lot of the times that he doesn't go over. You have that physicality of him, of Lindgren. Is it a wide open game and you need your defense to step up and score goals? You have that. And a guy like Adam Fox who can put the puck in the back of the net or can set things up at a very high clip. So I like this question from Kyle. And I'm going to go with the New York Rangers. Let me know, Kyle, in the comment section. Who would you go with? Do you have an answer to your own question? Because I find that as a very interesting question that I want to hear more people's opinions on. Let's go to some of these other questions here as well. That Peter says, do you think Sully won't take Nieto out of the lineup like he won't take Bo out? No, I don't think so. I think we're getting to the point where if it's not a player like a Puljujarvi or a Puustinen that's sitting, he's going to start getting pretty quick triggered if nothing's working. Now, do I think that they're going to continue to go as long as they have without figuring out anything in the bottom 6? No, I think eventually you start to figure things out. I already mentioned it on this show. I think that O'Connor, Eller, and Cody Glass line is something that deserves to continue to get pushed. So you have 3 of the pieces there. Now you just have to figure out 2 other forward lines. And there are pieces on those lines that are working. Last night, you saw a great connection. Puljujarvi with a beautiful pass to Bunting, and Bunting finally gets that first goal of the season. So because of that, maybe you give them another opportunity. Maybe you give them a little bit more ice time in the next game. Noel Acciari has been really good all season long. So you know that's a piece that is going to fit basically anywhere you put him. Maybe not try on the second line like they did in Tuesday's game last week against the Minnesota Wild, but he's going to work pretty much anywhere you put him. So once Matt Nieto comes back, I don't think Mike Sullivan is going to be overly concerned about keeping him in the lineup. I know that right now everybody's talking about Anthony Beauvillier, and because me and Horwat yesterday said that if we were building the lineup right now, we would take him out and put in guys like Puustinen and Puljujarvi in the 2 spots over him. But at the same time, you know, Sullivan likes veteran players that are responsible. That's what Anthony Beauvillier is. Now, albeit that is also what Matt Nieto is, but at the same time, I think when you look at what the season or how the season has gone, I think Mike Sullivan is going to continue to move these lines. So I don't think it's going to be a Jansen Harkin situation, which is what I'm imagining you're thinking of right now with Anthony Beauvillier. I don't think it's going to get to that point either. Let's go over to Dabton, who says, with Jari's conditioning assignment entering the second week, do they keep him down the full 14 days? And whenever he comes back, do they run the 3 goalie system? I wish I had the true answer to this. Like, I wish I had a direct line to Kyle Dubas, because I am very intrigued at the same exact question that Dabton poses here. He is staying down for the full 14 days. Kyle Dubas said that right off the jump. As soon as they sent him down, Dubas said he is going down there. He's staying down there the full 14 days, which comes up on Saturday of this week. And he also said he's going to be starting in every single game for the Wilkes-Barre Penguins. And true to form, that's what's happened to this point. So he is staying down there the full 14 days. Whenever he comes back, I don't believe they'll run the 3 goalie system for a simple reason. When Jari went down, he was far, far below average for the NHL level. They're hoping he comes up and is better. But at the same exact time, whenever that happened and whenever they ran the 3 goalies for, I believe they only did it for a handful of games after Nedeljkovic came back from IR. When that happened, Nieto was nowhere close to coming back. Blake Lizotte was not back on the active roster. And I believe, no, Brian Rust was playing. So never mind. Scratch that last one. But those are 2 other players that, I mean, Blake Lizotte is back in. Brian Rust is nearing his return from the IR. You're just not going to have the roster spots to be able to keep 3 goaltenders, especially with a young guy like Joel Blomqvist, who just needs to get ice time. He needs to play. It's already bothering me a little bit that he hasn't played in as long as he hasn't played, right? He hasn't played since last Tuesday against the Minnesota Wild. He needs to get ice time. He needs to get playing time. I think he'll get sent down because of the fact that, 1, you just don't have enough roster spots, and 2, whenever this initially happened, Nedeljkovic hadn't been playing as well as Nedeljkovic is playing now. So if Jari struggles, they're going to be able to lean on Nedeljkovic. Whereas before, if Jari would have struggled and they would have already sent back Blomqvist, who was playing the best of the 3, they would have been stuck with 2 goaltenders that were struggling. Right now, Nedeljkovic looks good. And I think because of that, once Jari returns, I think you'll see Blomqvist head down to the AHL for the first time this season. Let's jump over to Tanger, who says, do you think Crosby stepped it up not only to show everyone else, but also show Ovechkin anything you can do, I can do, considering they both had 5 goals in the last 3 games? I wouldn't doubt that there is some playful competition between Crosby and Ovechkin. But the one thing I will say about Sidney Crosby is, if it's outside of Pittsburgh, he's not overly concerned with it. This guy loves the game of hockey. He's going to watch hockey outside of Pittsburgh, but I don't think he's going to look at Ovechkin and go, I need to do it just because he did it. Now, is there part of him that probably is competitive and is saying, man, Ovi's still kicking at the age of 38 or 39, whatever Ovi is at this point. He looks like he's 42. I think there is, but I don't think Crosby's doing that as one of his top reasons. I think he's doing that mainly because the Penguins had lost 6 straight games and they were quickly falling to the bottom of the league. I mean, that Anaheim win prevented them from dropping to 32nd in the National Hockey League. I think that is much more of a driving factor to Crosby's recent, emergence as the top star, undeniable, can't stop him Crosby, the level that we've seen him in the last week. I think a lot of that has to do with what the Penguins are doing. Maybe a little bit because of what Ovi was able to do. Let's go to Kyle. Has a response to his own question. Says, I'd probably take the Golden Knights defense, similar to the reason that you said. I feel they have a bit of everything, including experience, scoring, shot blocking, physicality, and adaptiveness as well. I like that answer as well. I mean, let me bring up the Vegas defense right now, because they've changed it so many times, but they've always had that, right? Even the first year that they were in existence, it was Derek Englund matched with Shea Theodore, matched with I'm blanking on Alec Martinez matched with, Braden McNabb. So they've always had that, good mixture of physicality and skill set. This is their defense as of right now, according to Puckpedia. Alex Pietrangelo, who in and of itself is that type of defenseman, can do basically everything. Noah Hannafin, offensive. Shea Theodore, offensive, but also very good defensively. Braden McNabb still there. Zach Whitecloud, Nicholas Haig, Ben Hutton, Caden Korzak. The last two names, do what you will with them, but that is a good defense. Like, I agree with you. That is a good defense. So I would put them up there as well. And Kyle said that behind the Penguins forwards would keep the puck in their hands. I agree. But unfortunately, that's just not what the Penguins have right now. They have some offensive defensemen. I think Erik Karlsson specifically has played much better over the last handful of games. His start to the season was kind of mind-numbing because at least I was expecting him to kind of come out with a vengeance this year. It's not like he had a terrible season last year, but obviously he regressed. Everybody was expecting him to regress, maybe not to the level that he did. So I expected him to come out with a vengeance this season. He didn't. I was in shock. He's starting to come around the last handful of games. The one game, I can't remember exactly which one off the top of my head right now, but 21 shot attempts, absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. That's the type of offensive output that he's going to need to put up to make up for the fact that in his own zone, there's a lot of issues, right? That's what we always say. We know he's always going to be an issue in his own zone. Can he make up for it by being overactive in the offensive zone? The last couple of games he has been. And he's also not been as bad in the defensive zone. He hasn't been good, but he hasn't been as bad as he was early in this season. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live. Thank you so much to everybody that tuned in live here at the Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube. Make sure you like, share, subscribe to this video. If not, you can always catch us wherever you get your podcast from. But that's going to do it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.